Excellent. Well, I see that a number of folks continue to showcase where they are from and where they've served. It looks like the Air Force is currently winning in terms of the number of participants who have chatted. And again, we're just so thankful and delighted to have you here. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Jacks. I'm an Associate State Director with AARP Virginia. AARP Virginia is one of 53 state offices serving AARP's 38 million members nationwide. I'm here because AARP is on a mission to support veterans, military service members, and their families. So, I want to give you a little bit of background about AARP and our focus on support for veteran and military families. AARP has a long history of supporting veterans, military, and their families, including the nearly 6 million veterans who are AARP members today. I want to thank all of you who are AARP members. We greatly appreciate your membership. In Virginia, we've recently supported an honor flight event which flies veterans to our nation's capital to tour the war memorials, monuments, and Arlington National Cemetery. And with many of these veterans representing World War II, Korea, and Vietnam War eras, AARP volunteers proudly stepped up to help those with mobility needs and their caregivers with this wheelchair accessible vehicle to make their trip to and from, in our case, the Bedford, Virginia National D-Day Memorial and touring them around Washington, D.C. We are also sponsoring a free appreciation lunch for current military members, veterans, and their families in Lynchburg, Virginia later this month. You can find all of our free public tools, stories, and other resources for veterans and military families at aarp.org/veterans. I want to repeat that, and I will put it into chat as well. I repeat, aarp.org/veterans. I encourage you to take a look at that website. By listening to our members, by being in the community, and hosting forums and informational sessions, AARP knows veterans, military service members, and their families have unique challenges they're dealing with every day. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Colonel Donna Fore, U.S. Air Force retired, is currently a business owner in Central Texas. She is a retired military officer, having served her country for over 30 years in the U.S. Air Force. She served at the Pentagon and is a survivor of the terrorist attacks conducted on September 11th, 2001. Colonel Fore retired from active duty with over 30 years of military intelligence experience. Her areas of expertise included serving as the Air Reserve Component Intelligence Advisor to senior Air Force leadership at the Pentagon, serving as the Director of Intelligence for a joint task force deployed to Central America, providing commander-level indications and warning support at U.S. Central Command, designing, scripting, and participating in numerous major national-level war games and exercises at the North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Space Command, as well as additional force protection and intelligence support at all levels of command. She served in 2 overseas wartime campaigns, including supporting coalition air operations in Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf locations during the First Gulf War, and serving in Europe, providing targeting and intelligence support for all joint and coalition operations accomplished in 1999 during the Balkan Wars. Colonel Fore, I know that you have an inspiring message to share with us today, and I wish to again thank you for your service to our country. I turn it over to you and want to say that we so enjoyed your presentation in Lynchburg a year or so back that we couldn't let it go without having you before many others and a nationwide audience. So welcome and thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Brian. And I appreciate everyone that's here today. And real quickly, since this was dedicated to veterans, my sincere thanks to all the veterans and their families that may have tuned in today. And if you know a veteran that didn't make it to this event today, please take time to thank them for their service, because most of us that have served in the military, we've done hard things in difficult places with very little help and usually under very arduous circumstances. So my hat's off to all veterans, regardless of how long they served. Sometimes I hear veterans say, well, I'm not really a veteran because I was only in for a couple of years. And I said, it doesn't matter. You still served and you answered the nation's call. So you deserve all of the praise and honors that are heaped upon veterans because you are a veteran. So I'm going to get started because I have a lot to share. And what I'm going to share today is not a media recounting of 9/11, but a firsthand, boots on the ground person that lived through the day and what it was like. Now, obviously, I wasn't injured. I was not in the area that was directly impacted. If the plane had kept going through the building, it stopped at between the third and fourth ring of the Pentagon and affected about 3 stories going up. If it had kept going, it would have hit the section I was sitting in. But that section had, weirdly enough, been just renovated. So it had a lot of extra materials and improvements made to that section that allowed it to survive the attack versus if it had hit some other part of the building. I guess that was God's plan, right? So I'm going to give a brief, just kind of a timeline, because for some of you, you may kind of remember the day or kind of where you were. But here's how it rolled out. So in less than 4 hours, 9/11 was basically, that's how the event rolled out. So at 5:45 in the morning, this is all Eastern times I'm going to talk about, Muhammad Atta and Abdul Aziz Al-Amari, it was 2 hijackers that most people remember the most. They boarded a plane in Portland, Maine. They were going to Boston Logan Airport, right? At 7:59, so Muhammad Atta and his crew are headed to go to Boston and man their flight. By the way, all of the flights left from the East Coast, they were heading to the West Coast. There's a reason for that. They wanted planes that were big and heavily loaded with fuel. So when they impacted their targets, it would make a bigger explosion and kill more people. So that's the reason why they chose these big flights going to the West Coast, heavily loaded with fuel. There were 20 hijackers total for planes. Now, only 19 hijackers actually made it onto their planes, and here's why. Their scenario, their strategy was to have 5 hijackers on every plane. Again, there were 4 planes. And when they got to Boston, one of them had a problem with his documentation, so he wasn't allowed on the plane. Now, this is important for that plane that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because that plane only had 4 hijackers. That was the plane that the guy had the paperwork problem with. So with the less number of hijackers on the plane, it allowed those passengers to overcome the hijackers that were in the back watching them. See, the strategy was 3 of the hijackers would rush the cockpit, take it over, and do their plan. And they'd leave 2 hijackers in the back. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 hijackers would go to the front and then 3 in the back to subdue the crowd. So with that one less hijacker, that enabled those passengers to mount a plan and subdue their hijackers and bring down the plane. So just that one small thing had a big impact, right? So 8:15, United Airlines flight 175 takes off from Boston, and it's headed for LA. Again, all these flights are headed for somewhere on the West Coast. Now, on that flight 11 flight that we just talked about, a flight attendant alerts the ground personnel that there's a hijacking underway and that the cockpit is unreachable. So they already know at 8:15 in the morning that there's something going on, right? Because this flight attendant has told the ground forces that something's going on. There's a hijacking underway. So a few minutes later, just 1 minute later, 8:20, American Airlines flight 77 takes off from Dulles Airport outside of DC. That's the one that impacted the Pentagon. So I get weird when I read that. At 8:24, again, Muhammad Atta, he's on that first flight, that flight 11 flight. He inadvertently alerts the air controllers in Boston that they're about to do their attack because he hit the mic wrong. He thought he was just talking to the passengers on the plane, because he was going to tell them, hey, we're hijackers and you need to keep quiet and do whatever we ask you to do. But instead he hits the wrong mic, and now the ground controllers know exactly what's going on. 8:37, after hearing that broadcast from Muhammad Atta on Flight 11 in Boston, they now alert NORAD, the U.S. Air Force's Northeast Defense Sector, then mobilizes Air National Guard forces to follow the plane. Right, so NORAD's now alerted their Air National Guard planes airborne to try and find this plane and bring it down. 8:42, United Flight 93 takes off from Newark, New Jersey. It was delayed, so it had a little bit of a delay. And there's only 4 hijackers on that plane. That's the plane that gets brought down in Shanksville because the guy had the problem with his paperwork. Okay, now the first flight, the one that had Muhammad Atta on it, Flight 11 crashes into the World Trade Center's North Tower. Less than 15 minutes later, a little after 9 o'clock, Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. At 9:05, President Bush is he's at an elementary school in Florida, and one of his staff members comes in and whispers in his ear that there's something going on. And you remember this was covered on the press. He tries not to react. He keeps very calm and just, kind of continues with his work with the children. He says, I didn't want to jump up immediately and leave because I thought it would frighten the children, and I wanted to project a sense of calm. That was President Bush's words. At 9:28, the hijackers began their attack on Flight 93. Remember, that's the one that has one less hijacker on it. Flight 77 now crashes into the Pentagon. That's where my story picks up. After that, airspace gets closed down and nobody could fly after that. So let me pick up where then 9:37. So earlier around 9 o'clock, I got a call I worked for a 2-star general at the Pentagon, and he was the head of all Air Force intelligence. So his secretary is named Frances Wood. I'll never forget her. Frances calls me up and she says, Donna, the general needs to see you right away. Come down to his office. And I went, oh dear. It's never a good day when a general wants to see you. I thought, I must be in trouble or something's going wrong. So I get down there and he's not there. She's in his office watching the TV set. And she says, look at that. And at that point, only one plane has impacted. It's just before 9. So only the first plane has impacted the North Tower. And she said, what do you make of that? I said, I don't know. I've never seen a big plane get lost in a big city. That seems very odd to me, but maybe it's some kind of weird, freak accident. And then while we're sitting there talking, of course, just, 10, 15 minutes later, the other one comes in and hits the South Tower. And I said, Frances, where is General Schaefer? She said, oh, he's down over the Joint Staff. I think he's at a meeting down there. I said, Frances, do you know what room he's in? Yes. I said, go there and find him. She said, why? I said, I think we're under attack. I'm pretty sure this is an attack is underway. So she scurries off to find the general. Now I realize I need to tell my husband what's going on. So I run back to my office and I call my husband. He used to be a pilot, a civilian one, but still a pilot. And I said, turn on the TV set because he has no idea anything's going on. And he said, how could this happen that 2 planes? I said, that's why I'm calling you. I said, this seems like an attack to me. He said, yeah, I think you're right. There's no way that 2 planes lose their way in the middle of New York City and impact these 2 towers right next to each other. So now we know that something really big is underway. And of course, less than 30 minutes later, the Pentagon gets hit. Now, just sitting there in the building, okay, to me, it felt like an earthquake. I had been stationed in Japan for a while at Yokota Air Base, so I'd felt earthquakes almost every day there. The Japanese are renowned for being prepared for these kinds of things. So it felt like that. It felt like the building kind of shuddered. It went ba-boom, 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 right? I didn't hear anything. It just felt like it was shuddering to absorb the shock of that impact. Now, because the Pentagon is always a target of people that want to hurt the Pentagon, we had bomb threats pretty often. I would say at least weekly or a few times a month. So I thought maybe a bomb had gone off. I never really put 2 and 2 together. I thought all of the activity was only going on in New York. I never imagined that there were other planes airborne that were heading for other targets. But that was just me, right? Me not thinking through that this was all part of the same general plan. So I tell everybody I work in a big vault, right? Because I'm an intelligence person. So I get everybody out of the vault and I say, I'll lock up. I don't know why I even bothered to lock up, but it's just part of the thing I did every day. So everybody leaves. And as I'm trying to lock up this vault I work in, I look to my right and the hallway is just full of people. They're all kind of walking like this. The Pentagon is interesting. The lower floors have very wide aisles and hallways, right? As you get higher up in the building, and I was up on the 4th floor, there's 5 above and 3 below. The hallways get narrower and narrower. So all these people are trying to escape from the building, and they're coming from the direction where the plane had impacted. And as I watch them, because I can't get into them, they're so jammed together, I'm trying to find a way to insert myself into this big crowd of people. I see smoke behind them. So now I realize, okay, that's the genesis of whatever's going on. It's in that direction. And now I start to smell jet fuel. Anybody that's been in the military knows what jet fuel smells like. He's been around the planes. So I said, oh, it's not what I thought. It's not a bomb. It's something way worse. We've been hit with a plane just like all the other targets were. So I apologize if I get emotional at times because it was a rough day. Give me a second. So now you just kick into gear. You know we were supposed to go to evacuate the building. The military teaches you how to evacuate a building and where to go. So we had our little rally points outside the building. So we were trying to get to the normal place we evacuate the building, but of course that was the place where the plane had hit. So now we got to find an alternate way to get out of the building. So we do. And as I look back, then I can see that there's a lot of smoke coming from that side of the building where we would have normally evacuated to. So we're out in the parking lot now trying to figure out what to do. And we go to these rally points because that's what we're instructed to do. And we're starting to take inventory of who's there, right? Because you have to do some accountability of the people you work with. And, if you don't know where somebody's at, you say, well, does anybody even know if that person came to work? Accountability was a really big problem on 9/11. People didn't tell their boss or their coworkers, hey, I'm not coming in tomorrow, or I'm, at a meeting all day at CIA. So don't worry about me. I'm off station all day. So that became a huge issue after 9/11. We had to always keep accountability of each other because you never want to be, in the middle of an attack like that, not know where everybody's supposed to be, because we were beginning to think our comrades were dead. They weren't. They just weren't in the building. They'd gone to some meeting somewhere and they never told anybody. So after a few minutes, some really unusual things started happening. So the fire is moving its way around the building. Now, you may have noticed on file footage from the media that helicopters come and bring the president and the vice president, people like that, into the Pentagon. They have a little helipad next to the building. Well, the fire was moving its way around the building and it hit that helipad. So as we're standing there, this enormous explosion occurs. And we finally put 2 and 2 together and realized it was just the helipad exploding because it had fuel bladders, obviously, below that helipad. So now it's getting even more chaotic. We go to the front of where the building is and we ask if we can go back in and check on our, comrades. We're really worried about our people we work with. And they go, no, we can't let anybody back in the building. Just stay outside and we'll tell you what to do when the time comes. So we're just standing around sort of trying to process all this. And then something really unusual happens. We hear these loud sonic booms. If you ever heard a sonic boom from a military aircraft, it's pretty loud. So we hear boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what's that? It turned out that the DC Air National Guard started combat air patrols over Washington, D.C. I've never seen a combat air patrol other than in combat, right? So it's a major, city, and the D.C. Air National Guard has scrambled their aircraft so quickly that they all had sonic booms. They went off just as fast as they could. It's interesting that they were able to do that so quickly. I mean, within moments, they were airborne. So we're standing in the parking lot, we're watching these F-16s, flying all over DC, trying to keep any other aircraft from coming in, because they knew there were other aircraft out there. They just didn't know what their intended targets were, right? And it's widely believed that the Pennsylvania plane was coming to hit another DC target, probably the White House or something like that was what they presumed. We'll never really know what their target was, but they were coming back to DC anyway to hit DC. So at this point, we're really starting to wonder, what we should do. Some of the individuals were told they could go to other offsite locations to go to work. I didn't have one because I was an intelligence officer. I had to work in a secure area with a vault and things like that. So we didn't have an alternate place to work, but some people were beginning to filter out as best they could to maybe work over in another location if they had one. Again, everybody I worked with was an intelligence person, so we didn't have any alternate location. Getting the word out got pretty difficult because there weren't a lot of people that knew what was going on. So we were hearing things just kind of, it would be reported to us as somebody would hear something. I just heard this, or I just heard that. Okay. We were told just to stay put. Now, I know this is going to sound pretty silly, but we thought we were going back in the building. We thought whatever that fire is and that explosion, they'll get that put out. We're going to go back in the building. We're going to go right back to work and do what we're supposed to do. Well, obviously that didn't happen, right? But that was our thinking, is here we're in the military. We don't care about an explosion. We don't care about a fire. We're just going to go back in the building and do our work. So that's what we thought, right? Just being in the military, you're just used to doing odd things under weird circumstances. So we just kept kind of waiting for more word. Well, eventually by the middle of the afternoon, we've been out there for hours now, hoping we could get back in the building. There's no way they can let us back in. So the word comes back, if you can, please try and get home. Well, by now, every DC agency has released their personnel, plus even civilian companies. People were just going home like crazy. So it was gridlock out there. Plus, you got to remember, the Pentagon parking lot had been where this explosion had occurred. There were pieces of the plane and other things out in the parking lot. So they didn't want you taking your vehicle out of the parking lot because it might have some forensic value. There might be some piece of something on your car that they want to exploit as part of the investigation of the incident. So we're told, okay, I didn't take a vehicle in that day. I took a bus, and the buses weren't running properly because of what was going on. So I had no way home. So, and I can't call my husband. That's another weird thing about 9/11. The cell phones didn't work that day. The system got totally saturated. So you couldn't call out, if you did have your cell phone on you. So but I had managed to grab mine and take it out with me. So in this little group I'm in, people have started to kind of filter away and do their own thing. But there was one individual that had stayed the whole time. He said, I have the biggest vehicle. He says, it's kind of at the outer edges of the parking lot. So we go up to this DC cop who's there now trying to keep all of us from taking our vehicles out of the parking lot. And I kind of explained, I've got my, lieutenant colonel at that point, insignia on. I guess maybe he thought, well, I better not mess with this lady. But anyway, I go up to him and I say, listen, my friend's car is way over there. We've got to get some people home. We've been out here for hours and we don't know what to do at this point other than go home and try and wait for some word. He said, looks around. You guys get out of here. So, okay, great. So we sprint to his vehicle and we get out of there. So he's going to drive all of us home. But I lived in Fredericksburg. I lived the furthest away. And I said, take everybody else home and then we'll figure out what to do with me later. So he does. It takes him hours to get us to where we need to go because it's gridlock in DC. No one's able to move. Eventually, I told him, I said, take me to the nearest metro. There was a big metro stop in Springfield. If you're familiar with the DC area, Springfield metro stop. I said, take me there. I'll try and figure out how to get home from there. I didn't have a plan, but I said, I'll figure it out. She drops me off and now I'm thinking, okay, I can't call my husband. The buses aren't running. I can't take the VRE train because it's not running properly right now. Nothing's running. So I walk into the building and I'm thinking, okay, I'll just sit here for a while, try and figure things out. So as I walk in, I see the most beautiful thing I'd seen that whole day, a payphone. So there was a payphone on the wall. So I said, okay, I've got money in my pocket. I'll call my husband on the payphone. So I call him and he's delighted to hear I'm alive. I said, you need to call my parents and your mom and let everybody know I'm not dead, because everybody was watching that footage of the Pentagon. They thought, Donna must be right there. I can't hear from her. She's not calling me, so she must be dead. So he did. He called everybody and said, don't worry, Donna's alive. She's just trying to get home. So it took him hours to get to the Springfield Metro to pick me up, but he did. So the rest of the day, I'm just waiting for a phone call. I was told you'll get a phone call from the air staff. That's the headquarters for the Air Force, and they will tell you what to do. So just before midnight, I get this phone call and they say, is this Lieutenant Colonel Fore? I said, yes, it is. And they said, here are your instructions. You're to get to the Pentagon as early as possible tomorrow morning. Find your BDUs and wear them because we're at war. And I went, wow, okay, let's do it. Let's rock and roll. Now, that sounds like an easy thing to do, but at the Pentagon, you wear your blues. You don't wear your BDUs every day. So I had to find them and get them cleaned up and get ready for work for the next day. So I got up at 4 a.m. That was my typical routine at the Pentagon. I got up at 4 a.m, usually caught my bus, and I got to the Pentagon by 6 because you have to get to the Pentagon early because just so much happens there overnight. So So I did the same routine, but this time I drove myself. So because the buses and everything weren't super reliable at that point. One of the eeriest things I saw, well, I got to the building and the roof's on fire. So I walk in, I'm walking in and say, okay, I'm walking into a burning building. No big deal. Okay, so I do that. But when I got inside, the building was just so damaged, right? The walls were scarred with black soot. It was water was everywhere. Some of the hallways I had to walk down were still, there was no power to them. There was some generator power to parts of the Pentagon, but some parts just were just too heavily damaged. I was trying to get to my office through these parts and it was very weird. It smelled bad. There was, do you ever remember seeing these big boxes on walls that had hoses in them and it said break in case of a fire? If you remember from way back when, all of those were broken out on the bottom floor. Every single one had been used. All those hoses had been removed and they'd used them to fight the fire. I'd never seen anything like that before. But the worst part was when I got to there's a courtyard in the center of the Pentagon. You know, it's a 5-sided building. And there's this little court in the center. It was mostly where the smokers took their breaks because they had to have a place to go smoke, or people walked outside just to get a breath of fresh air. On 9/11, when I peered through those doors for the first time to see what was going on, there were body bags stacked in there. As they had found the people that had died in the building, they had taken them out to that court. They had no place to put them. So they took them to the courtyard and put them in body bags. And I thought, wow, the place where I work is now turned into a morgue. Now, over the next day or two, they all got removed. But for those first few days, it was pretty traumatic to see that. Most of the civilians didn't report back the first couple of days. They took leave. All the military were instructed to come. So the building was kind of not at full speed because we didn't have everybody in there. We had only the military. 30,000 people work at the Pentagon. So when it's not full, it almost looks strange to be walking down a hallway and not see somebody. So my first task was to find linguists. My boss told me, your job, Donna, is to find every linguist you can that's been in the reserves or active duty or whatever status they have. And we need them in these languages. He rattled off all the languages he wanted: Arabic and Pashtun and Dari and a bunch of others. So I did. I started finding reservists. Now, some of them had not been active duty in a long time. So we had to get them, up to par for everything they needed and also get their clearances restored because we needed them to go overseas and they had to have a clearance to do that for the work that they were going to do. So in some instances, we could mobilize people quickly. Other ones took a few months or weeks or whatever it took to get them mobilized. It was very chaotic those first 6 to 12 months after the attack. We worked literally like 18 to 20-hour days. There were times when I called my husband because I was driving to work every day at that point. And I said, you're going to have to come and pick me up. I'm too tired to drive myself home. And I said, I don't want to sleep in my cubicle tonight. I just can't do that. So he'd come and pick me up at like 1 in. I'd come home for a few hours, change my clothes and go right back to the Pentagon. And a very inspiring moment, on 9/12, when I drove into work that day, some amazing Americans had draped these huge American flags over every overpass as you're driving into DC. And the sight of those flags was very inspiring because it made me realize, we're Americans. You can't pick a fight with us without us coming back at you. If you attack one of us, you attack all of us. And we're Americans and we're not going to take it. And they killed 3,000 people that day. So we weren't just going to lie down and forget about it, right? So we were going to go and find them. Now, it took almost 10 years to find Osama bin Laden and take care of him. It was May the 2nd of 2011 that he was killed by those special forces units in Pakistan. But the intelligence community went on high alert to find him. It took a long time, but we did it. So most of the intelligence community's job was to try and find the perpetrators and deal with them, right? My role was a little different, though. I wasn't finding terrorists. I was just finding people to go and help prosecute the war over there. As you know, after 9/11, a lot of brave young men and women joined the military, to include my own nephew, who joined the Marines. Because of 9/11, he's out now and he's fine, but he was hurt in Fallujah, but he's fine now. Again, he was in the Marine Corps. So my hat's off to any veteran that joined after 9/11 because they knew they knew when they joined, they were going to a war. They just didn't know where they were going, right? So, and that's when we prosecuted the wars in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. So, and we should, on Veterans Day, have a special remembrance for them because thousands and thousands and thousands of young men and women died during OEF and OIF, trying to keep the terrorists from coming back and deal with the ones that had perpetrated the attacks on 9/11. So I have a very special place in my heart for those young men and women. I'm sorry. You can see it affects me. So that's my story. If anybody has a question or, comment, I do ask you to do one thing on Veterans Day is try and go to some event to honor veterans if you're able to. If you're not, then just say a prayer for all the veterans, those that aren't with us anymore and those that, are still around. And always take a moment to reflect on 9/11. I know some of you probably were a little younger when that happened. Some remember it just like it was yesterday, right? You probably remember where you were and who you talked to that day. But for me, it's a heavy day. I should have mentioned this, but it took a while for the casualty list to come out because, quite honestly, there wasn't a lot of some people left to identify because of the fires that had ensued. But after a while, I found out that 9 people I had worked with, mostly at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and 2 that were in the Army. The epicenter of the attack on the Pentagon was at the head of the Army Personnel Office, right? The highest ranking person that died in the Pentagon was a 4-star general who was the head of all Army personnel. In fact, the center point was kind of in that office. So 2 of his officers were people I worked with a lot, and then 7 of the Defense Intelligence Agency people. They had a big budget office there, and they were all wiped out. So I remember them on 9/11 and feel bad for their families that still mourn for them, as would any 9/11 family. So I apologize. It's hard not to
Please.
talk about this.
Oh, there's nothing to be apologizing for. We are just so appreciative of your kindness and your willingness to come and help us as we focus this month, the entire month, on veterans and military families. I want to let you know that the chat room is just delightful what's taking place here, with someone even saying, you are totally allowed to react, reliving this experience while telling it to us. And this person was in the Pentagon when an Army cousin was assigned there years ago on the lower level. So again, just a recounting and
Wow.
appreciation and a sense of understanding. And another is just again delightful comment. We need everyone in the country to be hearing this, in reference to, again, just a reminder of our divided country at times, and just saying, hey, you're marvelous and generous to be sharing that with us. Um, I want to just to make sure that everyone that's participating here today knows that Colonel Fore is willing to answer questions, and I'd ask that you drop those into the question and answer button, the box which should be at the center of your screen at the bottom. I want to thank AARP volunteer Pamela Chisholm, who's helping me make sure I don't miss any questions, and I
Thanks,
appreciate you
Dan.
being here, Pam. Um, one of the questions that did come through was asking in reference to you being an intelligence officer, if you know if there had been any kind of pre-knowledge, anything that could have given us some warning. And again, this is not conspiracy theories or anything like that, but just a sense of, was there a recognition? Oh, we missed some warnings. Maybe kind of like Pearl Harbor kind of thing, as you hear individuals say, oh, if we had paid attention or thought of this, it would have maybe allowed us to be more prepared. I'll just let you answer that in any way.
There were a few instances where some law enforcement, not national law enforcement like FBI, but more local law enforcement had some suspicions about some of the hijackers. They had tried to alert other authorities that, hey, you might want to check these guys out. And probably just because we weren't thinking, that everybody out there might be a terrorist like we are now, they just kind of dismissed it as, oh, these folks are they're fine. Don't worry about them. But the hijackers were also here a very long time. It took them years to perpetrate their attacks, but they were very careful to blend in with their surroundings. They would look like anybody else. They would go to local restaurants and bars and hang out, and people got to know them. So it wasn't like a bunch of, Arab Americans just showed up in one place and started doing things, which would alert people to their presence. They were very smart in how they executed their preparation for the attacks, because they all went to those flying schools, remember, to learn how to fly. So you would think that that would be unusual and somebody would have noticed it, but it just kind of went underneath the radar just because of their years of preparation and the fact that they kind of blended in with their surroundings. So, but there were a few instances where local law enforcement was beginning to get some idea that maybe they were up to something, but they were not taken seriously. So,
All right. Here's a pretty just standard question. You mentioned some type of uniform that you had to wear. What was the abbreviated clothes name? The BDRs, I think you said.
oh, the BDUs. Oh, it means battle dress uniform. It's just what, all the services have a fatigue uniform, which is a more or less a work uniform that you wouldn't wear, say, in a place like the Pentagon. But yeah, it's our battle dress uniform. It's a camouflage
Yeah,
uniform. So
yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah.
Miss Shrek has posted a question that I have written down here on a post-it note. I was going to ask it if no one else did, and she puts it in much better terminology than I did. Here it is. What comfort and help did you receive after 9/11 to help you and others that were there with you with this traumatic event? She says, I've been crying with you, and my heart is remembering how I felt as I stared at my TV that morning. And again, I just want to point out this is an emotional topic, and it is okay to be heartfelt in this manner. And I just really appreciate that. But yeah, I said grief and support following trauma. Even if I was wondering if there are gatherings of individuals who were there that day that maybe perhaps even still meet. But you go ahead and answer those questions if you would, please.
There aren't any organized groups that get together that were there in the building that day. Now, they do have a 9/11 event every year at the Pentagon, obviously. And by the way, the place where the plane impacted at the Pentagon is now a chapel. I think that's great that they chose to do that as a way of, bringing some peace and calm to a place where, nobody probably wanted to go back to work at that place anymore. And it wasn't able to. So they had to figure out a new way to use that space in a different way. So they chose to make it a chapel. And it's going to surprise you, but there's a lot more religion at the Pentagon than you would imagine. We had Bible study groups. In fact, my Bible study met in that general's office. He would give it up every Wednesday and go to a meeting or go to lunch, whatever he did. And we could use his office for our Bible study. So as weird as it seems, there was a lot of God in the Pentagon. And what got me through those difficult days was my faith. I had to rely heavily on the fact that God would get us through it, the good news about 9/11 is that there weren't more people killed, right? That some people did survive the Twin Towers. Some people survived at the Pentagon. Sadly, the plane in Shanksville, everyone died, but there were survivors. And also the fact that we fought back. The good news is 9/12, we fought back. We didn't take it lying down. We said, no, you can't kill 3,000 Americans and, us not do something about it. So I'm very proud of the fact that we did that and proud to have been a part of that. It was difficult, like I said, arduous to go into the building every day at 6 in the morning and not get off till midnight. Just to show you how difficult it was. When Thanksgiving rolled around a few months after 9/11, I cooked a meal for my nephew who was at Quantico and my husband and a few of their Marine friends. And I went right back to work. I came home for a few hours, cooked, and went back to work. And that went on for a year. That was the ops tempo in that building was just frenzied, right? Because we knew we had to do everything we could to help the troops down range. A lot of people laugh about the Pentagon and they say those guys don't do anything over there, just a bunch of politicians. Oh no, we support the troops. We're getting them their bullets and their whatever they need, right? We're
Yeah,
getting them the
food,
money and the
supplies.
resources to do the war. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why the Pentagon exists. So
Well, I really appreciated your mention of how the mood of Washington, D.C., in terms of helpfulness, care for fellow Americans, a sense of coming together. I just think that that's, again, a spirit that we need to see more regularly. And I remember so many individuals purchasing the flag magnets that then, were put on all the cars. And again, just small things when I think about, victory gardens and World War II and some of the, efforts that were taken during World War II timeframe to show, hey, we're in it together. Um, I just really appreciate you pointing out that spirit of, hey, this has been an attack on all of us, and we are united in trying to protect our country further. So thank you.
And you'll probably remember that for a short while after 9/11 had happened, people were talking to each other. They were nicer to each other. They were flying their flag. They were just a different spirit, really enveloped the country because we felt, as Mark just pointed, or Brian just pointed out, that we were united. So I hope that in the aftermath of what's happened, with our election, we can recapture that because we have a lot of things to solve as a country. And doing it united will help a lot because there's just a lot of things going on for us to tackle, across the board. So I'm hoping there'll be a spirit of unity that comes back because, Brian, you're right. It was different after 9/11. We really came together. And for months and months and months, everywhere I would go, there'd be, because I this is going to sound weird. In the DC area, they have something called slugging, where you can get a free ride to work. You go to a commuter lot and you wait for someone to pick you up in their car so that they can get in the HOV lanes, right? The high occupancy vehicle lanes. So sometimes I slugged when I didn't feel like I wanted to drive myself to the Pentagon. And at every one of those commuter lots where people were getting rides or picking up buses or whatnot, there'd be these banners put up, homemade banners. They could have been made for kids for all I know. And they'd say, "Thank you, military. Thank you, Pentagon workers. Thank you for all that you're doing." It was like there was a recognition that, there was a lot going on and that we were tired. There were days I just could barely, we were at work every single day. I didn't have a day off, right?
Yeah.
I already told you what I did on Thanksgiving. The same went on for Christmas and every other holiday. We didn't care. We knew that what we were doing was important, and we wanted to do everything we could to ensure that the guys and gals, like I said, that were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan had everything they needed. And so we never questioned coming into work early or staying late. We were there for them, right? Because if
Yeah.
I was over there, I'd want somebody depending on taking care of me by getting me all the money I needed and all the resources I needed and, making sure that I had every single thing I needed when I asked for it. So it was a big deal and we were glad to do it. So
We just so thank you. I just have to read another one. This has been absolutely fascinating. Kim says, I've never thought about what the individuals must have gone through. And I teared up every time you did, Miss Fore. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your service. And I just really appreciate that you are pointing out that there were a lot of people that were putting their boots on. Robin says it's funny that she had to make her camouflage clean to go back into work the next day. Again, I appreciate it. Just again, a little bit of lightheartedness there, but a sense that, you're not seeking glory. You're saying there were so many individuals that were willing to go back in the next day. I wrote down here with the roof on fire.
yes.
I almost can't believe that there's a sense that we are truly in a battle. This is war, and we've got to do our duty. And obviously, you had years of service prior, leading up to that assignment at the Pentagon. But I assume that not everybody had that experience of even smelling jet fuel. I mean, some of our military, I would think, goes straight to the Pentagon. But you tell me if I'm wrong. But you'd seen some things that others had not, and I just so appreciate you pointing out that, hey, linguists, these are not individuals that are, pulling the trigger out there or moving cannons around, but we needed their help, and every person had a component to play in the work that needed to be done. That's what I'm hearing from you and showing appreciation today.
Thank you so much, Brian. This has been a delight to hear all these different questions. You guys have raised some great questions. And if there's anything else I can clarify for you all, just let me know. I guess that what I want to leave you with is the hope and inspiration that comes from going through a tragedy like that. I've finally decided to get a little bit of some counseling, professional counseling, because 9/11 has kind of haunted me for a long time. And I can confess now, I feel like I have PTSD because I think I tried to just dismiss it or pretend it wasn't there. And I finally realized, if you cover up a problem by just not acknowledging it, you're not being honest with yourself. So I had to be honest that, this was bigger than me. I probably needed to talk to someone who's more professional and understands these kind of traumas and can help me kind of manage it better.
Yes.
And so I'm glad I've started that journey. It's taken me over 20 years to do that, but I'm glad I'm finally recognizing I probably need to talk to somebody. So
Well, I just again applaud you in that. And I want to say that AARP has some different types of resources, and I want to just share one that deals with caregiving. Individuals who are serving as caregivers for someone who has been in the military. It's a little different, and not everybody has had the same life experiences. But I do want to just point out AARP having some specific resources for caregivers. AARP supports 5.5 million veteran and military caregivers in the United States who deliver voluntary, uncompensated care for their wounded warriors every day. These hidden caregiving heroes need our help to make it easier for those who wore America's uniform to live independently in their homes and communities for as long as they safely can. The research shows that military and veteran caregivers consistently experience worse health outcomes, greater strains on family relationships, more workplace challenges than non-caregivers, and they tend to provide care earlier and longer than other caregivers, often due to service-related injuries. And that's why it's important for AARP to provide tools, resources, and support to these frontline family caregivers. I'm going to drop a link to this very specific caregiving resource in the chat. I've also put the more broad aarp.org/veterans web link in, which lists a number of different tools and resources focusing on fraud, caregiving, again, general appreciation of AARP for service members. And I just want to thank everyone who's participated here today. There are a number of different chats that I can't read them all, but just really thanking you, Colonel Fore, for being willing to share your heart and very openly and honestly give us an insight into the challenges of serving one's country in different ways and at different time periods. I wish to close out again with that AARP veterans link, also sharing that AARP, as a small token of appreciation, offers a savings on AARP memberships year-round. We're not selling memberships here today, but want to let you know you can get instant access to discounts and programs and services and the information needed to benefit many areas of your life. But these veteran resources and tools and the website that I've shared there are open to non-members as well. So we're here today to, as was pointed out by Robin, one of our participants, let's remember that we are one nation and be kind to one another. I truly couldn't say it any better. We want to thank you all, those of you who served, and also family members who recognize the sacrifice it is to support those family members who are out in the field or here on our homeland protecting our country. And with that, I will close out today's program. God bless.
God bless. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Goodbye.